close of the event today. Really quickly, when you registered, you should have gotten a program and a trifold that has some important information in it. I do recommend you look at it and read it. It not only has our agenda in there, but it has some key contact information for our team, and it highlights a program that we do run in Hartford that we do want to bring to your attention if you have clients who are age appropriate. I want to start off here with this opening statement. I really admire Scott for a number of reasons. One, he hired me, so that's it's a good thing. I get paid every 2 weeks, so that's a really good thing. No, but I admire Scott for a number of reasons. I think, in many ways, Scott represents kind of my spirit animal from a different generation. And he represents that for me because I value relationships quite a bit. I love the nonprofit arena, and I know he does too. But one of the things that I noticed about Scott when we began to work together is the way he treats partners and the way he treats people like you. He cares deeply about the people in his room. He cares deeply about the people we partner with. And as I gotten a chance to experience that as someone who works for him and as someone who's watching him work daily, it dawned on me that I enjoy watching him do what he does, do what he do, whatever. Do what he do. Do what he do. Yeah. I enjoy watching him do his work because there's a kindredness there in terms of how we approach relationships. Now, there is one key difference, and he gets on me about this all the time. I'm the guy that enjoys getting coffee with everyone, and he just, nah, that's not his thing. But the principle is the same. Spending quality time with someone because you see the value in them, and you're hoping that they see the value in you. With that in mind, this is the reason why this year's theme is about strategic partnerships that closes the opportunity gap. As he said when he gave his opening, funders who are eager, to some extent, to give away their money are requiring us more and more to work together. And it's becoming an expectation for all of us to figure out a way to partner up and actually mean it. Now, there is no surefire way to legislate relationships or partnerships. So therefore, what we typically do as providers, we just get together and say, hey, you do this, I do this, we're good to go, sign an MOU, and boom, we're off to the races. If we're fortunate to get a contract or a grant, it is what it is. But there seems to be a lack in those relationships, and that lack seems to show up in a lack of intentionality and purpose and meaning. When we put together this year's theme, I had this in mind. I wanted sizable nonprofits, mid-sized nonprofits, and smaller nonprofits to get together in a room to have a discussion to talk about what it looks like to partner together for real. Because our clients are demanding it just as much, if not more, than our funders. I know it feels good to say that you do XYZ service for XYZ customer. At the same time, there has to be a recognition that there are limitations to your ability to provide the services your customer needs. And I'm sure you've been hearing it just like we have. Our customers want more. They demand more. And I think it's our job to give them more. But you got to find the value in partnership. Sometimes we ignore our customer and we don't really respond to them and give them the attention that they need. And therefore, we don't put the effort into developing partnerships enough to make it sustainable or long lasting. If you do an autopsy of the relationships that you have developed in this business, in the nonprofit business, what percentage would you say, and this is rhetorical, what percentage would you say of those relationships are still standing today? It makes you think. It makes you wonder. Because when you think about the reference Scott gave about getting married and dating, it's intended to be together forever, or at least for a long while. But when you compare that to the relationships we develop in the nonprofit arena, our relationships don't seem to last that long or not beyond the grant requirement. That's a problem. Because even though the money stops, the services our customers demand do not stop. Therefore, intentionally or unintentionally, we're leaving our customers hanging, struggling, suffering. But perhaps today's conversation can lead us to a conclusion. or to a resolution. So I want to share some stats with you just to kind of put some of this in perspective. National statistics say that as of 2015, there were 1.5 million tax-exempt organizations in the United States. This includes nonprofits, NGOs, and faith-based organizations. As of 2010, nationally, the nonprofit arena makes up a little over 9% of the salaries and wages paid in the private sector. I'm sharing that with you because our business, our community as nonprofit providers, we're viable employers. We're here to stay. We're here to do a job. We may not make millions of dollars. We may not get the recognition we probably deserve, but based upon the salary and the percentages that are paid out to us as providers, we're major contributors to our economy, but it's becoming seriously overcrowded. In the state of Connecticut, as of 2016, there were over 18,000 nonprofits in our little small state. 18,000 nonprofits. As of 2016, the nonprofit community employs 14% of Connecticut's workforce overall. This excludes the private sector. This is overall. 14%. We employ 14% of the workforce in the state. And as of 2019, state foundations awarded over $999 million annually. Now, if you do the math, that's roughly $54,000 on average given to every nonprofit around the state. Now, I don't know about you. I don't think $54,000 cuts it. It barely pays your salary. Maybe the secretary's salary, barely pays rent. And in many cases, while that's an average, $54,000, there are many nonprofits who don't even see that annually. And then there are some of us who see that on a monthly basis. This requires us to think differently about partnerships, because every day there are new nonprofits opening up looking to take your spot, because there is a competitive edge in our business. While we want to do good, there are a whole lot of people that want to do good at the expense of you. Therefore, they open their doors, they put up a shingle, and they say, hey, I'm here to provide services, and they're coming for your spot. Which, if you're honest, it's really healthy for us, because the more competition we have in the marketplace to provide quality services, intentional services, the better off our customers are. But there is a reality to that game. And that reality is, just because there are more nonprofits coming online, that does not mean there's more money becoming available for those nonprofits to take. Somebody's going to get left out. So what do you do? If you are a small startup, if you're new, or if you're small or mid-sized and you're trying to grow, what do you do in a competitive environment when there's only but so much money to give out, to award, and you know the competition is stiff? What do you do? How do you compete with an organization that's been around for 20, 45 years, I heard earlier this morning? What do you do with a standing relationship that precedes you, probably been around longer than you've been alive? How do you break into that? It's a serious question that we all have to grapple with. Even if you are an established organization or you've been in this business for a while and you're looking for growth opportunities, expansion opportunities, what do you do when the dollars are still limited? Perhaps the solution that we can seriously consider is in our theme today: strategic partnerships. Breaking through by way of relationships. Putting behind us the culture of Hartford of kill, seek, and destroy. Letting go of that competitive attitude at any cost, because partnerships matter more. Throughout this conference, throughout the talks, throughout the panel discussions, I want to explore this. I want to see this conversation become robust. I want to see us engage in understanding and discussing what it looks like to develop strategic partnerships that matter for your viability, for the viability of your organization, and more importantly, for the viability of our customers. So I do want to share some tips with you before I pass off the baton to our next keynote speaker. Here's the first thing I want to talk about: how do we successfully navigate the competitive landscape of partnerships? It's hard to create partnerships when you're cold calling folks or you're meeting folks for the first time. How do you do this? Perhaps the easy thing is you just showed up at this free event. During the breaks, you get out of your shell, you shake hands, introduce yourself. Maybe you didn't bring business cards, or maybe your marketing material isn't as nice as the next person. Who cares? That's not what wins business or partnerships, is it? The color scheme of your business card, is that what makes the difference? Scott just said, I mean, it's about the dating process. It's about how we engage, how we feel when we interact with each other, how you make me feel. Do you make me feel welcomed? Do you make me feel like I matter, even though we just met? So here are some, I like that smile. Thank you. That was encouraging. Here are some thoughts I want to share with you. When you start to get deeper into these things, do not overpromise. I heard a like we're in church or something like that. Stop overpromising. I think we're guilty of that, particularly in our business. We're guilty of overpromising and significantly under-delivering in our business. You want to know why we do that? Because we want to do more than what we're capable of doing. We bite off more than we can actually chew, and our eyes are actually bigger than our appetite. What does that mean? What does that translate into? The customers we see every day in our communities are desperate, they're struggling, they're hungry, and they're knocking on our doors, and we see the need to fill their need, and therefore we promise that we can fit that need beyond our capability. It's dangerous for a number of reasons. In business, you overpromise, underdeliver, you lose contracts, you lose agreements. In terms of customer relations, once a customer feels like they can't trust you ever again, they stop shopping at your store, or they stop coming to your program, which is equivalent to the end of shopping. And we all know in our business, no butts in seats means no next grant. Stop overpromising. Scott hit this, but I think it's worth hitting again. We need to focus more on win-win solutions. For a community of people who actually cares about the customer, who cares about what we do, we can be some of the most selfish people in business, because we know the scarcity of money, the limitations of grant awards, and the competitive nature forces us to be extremely selfish. And yet, when we walk into a relationship, we start negotiating on behalf of our customers, we rarely forge a win-win solution that makes sense for everyone involved. And it makes it difficult to build trust, particularly in this region. When I moved here 4 years ago, this is one of the things I learned really quickly. Trust is hard to earn in this state, in this community. Perhaps it's because we rarely think about the other person, or we don't think about the other company enough. Here's the third thing I want to share with you. Building relationships for the sake of building them because the funder says do it, it's not really healthy. It's almost like going on a date with someone because your mama said you need to go find out if this is the one. And we all know, if you've been there, if you're really honest, you did date that one person who's this weird person that you really didn't have an attraction to, only just to please your mom. It really doesn't work out all that often, does it? But we do that a lot in our business. We see so-and-so sitting across the room and we say, you know what? I'm going to add you to our roster of providers. And it is not the right fit. It's not the right fit. But then what are the elements of a strong partnership? What makes sense for a long partnership? Number one, you should have a shared purpose, a shared intent. What is it that you want to see happen long-term with your program, with your organization, with your customers? What is it that you want to see happen? And does the other organization have the same shared interest as you? This is not to be confused with serving the same customer. That doesn't make us aligned just because we like the same people, we serve the same people, we run in the same circles. No, there has to be the same intentionality in our work. Here's the next thing you should look for: proactive and intentional communication. Good, bad, or indifferent, how can I intentionally connect with you and talk with you? Or in my case, how often can we go get a cup of coffee and just talk? On purpose. Just so that we can connect. And then here's one of my favorites: the intentionality of constant planning together. How often do you plan together? How often do you mitigate issues together? How often do you work through challenges together with your partners? If you're starting to put the pieces of the puzzle together, these types of things builds trust and respect. It builds affection. It builds closeness between organizations. And the customer wins at the end of the day. So I'm getting ready to introduce our next keynote speaker. But I do want to leave you with just one more thought here. I think that our customers deserve higher quality of services. Would you agree?
Yes.
I think our customers deserve better efficiency. Would you agree?
Yes.
Would you agree that our customers deserve a deeper impact in their lives by way of the services we provide? I'm going to challenge you as you engage today, as you listen today. While, yeah, you came for selfish reasons and this is about you, it's a professional development experience, I get that. I also challenge you to think about your customers throughout this day. What can I take away today, not to advance my career, but what can I take away today that will help me do my job better for my customers? For career resources, for us, our customers are currently in prison. Some are still under supervision. Some of our customers are unemployed or underemployed. Some of our customers are still in high school, getting ready to graduate and jump into one of our program slots. Some of our customers are currently employed and doing very well, but they could be our customer at the next economic downturn. And as we think about those people on a daily basis, our job at Career Resources is to plan for our customers. And that may mean partnering with you, or you, or you, or you. Even if it takes a while to build, I think you can read Scott's attitude. He's a patient guy. He's in it for the long haul. Whatever it takes, we will do. But I share that as a challenge to you too. Think about your customers. Think about how you can do more for them, better for them. To further add nuance to today's conversation, I specifically invited this gentleman here who is new to our community. He hails from Youngstown, Ohio. He was the mayor of Youngstown at one point. He was recently a part of our president's administration. Pause, not the current one. Previous. I was letting it pause for a minute before I jumped in. He was part of the previous president's administration that I'm talking about. Jay Williams. Jay, you can come on up as I'm introducing you. He is currently the president and CEO. He's currently the president and CEO of the Hartford Foundation. And, even the way I met you, just standing behind you in line at a Starbucks. It's amazing. So as I get Jay mic'd up, please welcome him. Feel free to take pics in the meantime of this awkward silence. Post on our social media pages. And the next voice you hear will be Jay Williams. Well, this is for the camera. You need a handheld too?
Oh, it's fine.
Put this in your pocket.
We're using it just for the
sound.
Okay, I can use it. It's fine. Good morning.
Morning.
let me say, first of all, thank you to Dr. Clark for inviting me here. As he mentioned, we met at the Starbucks just downtown and met in what I think is an odd way. So there's a lot of ways that I have an opportunity to meet people. Sometimes because of the positions that I've held. Other times I'm just my wife tells me, a chatterbox. I just start chatting people up in random places over things that, you know, we may or may not have in common. And other times people tell me they recognize me from a distance because they see the back of my head, which, you know, as I've grown up now, my body is now more in proportion to my head than I was when I was a kid. And I tell my 8-year-old son, Ethan, believe me, it'll get better. It's just, this is just who we are. They're like, yeah, I've noticed you from the back. I'm like, oh, yeah, I saw your head. It's like, okay. But when I met Dr. Clark, it was interesting. I was ordering my Starbucks, and he was a couple people behind me. He said, oh, I recognized your voice, which was, you know, a new one. Because, again, I often, like, I hate the way I sound when you hear yourself recorded. I think all of us hate it, but I just hate my voice even more. And again, my wife often tells me that my voice carries, as does Ethan. So it's just this thing. So when he said, I recognized you by the sound of your voice, and we struck up a conversation, he started telling me about his role. He was relatively new. Has been here 4 years, as he indicated. I've been here now 2 years, and just really hit it off, and subsequently had some further conversations, and he started to tell me about this conference. And I immediately agreed. Just, again, one, I was fascinated with him as a person, with the work that he was doing. But I say all that to say that over the course of the last 15 or so years of my career, I truly have been blessed to speak in a lot of different places across the country, across the world, sometimes involving, you know, a dozen people, sometimes involving thousands of people, and everywhere in between. And over those years, I've developed somewhat of a habit of trying to figure out or evaluate my role and how I can be valuable when asked to speak, but also how I evaluate in my own mind sort of the caliber or the impact of the conference. What you also always want to do is, you know, just touch base with the conference presenters or organizers to get a feel of the conference, the theme, to understand what they want to convey so you can contribute to that. Again, because I'm here as a guest, I want to add value. So I always like to do that. I always try to get from them what they want me to say, and generally without, you know, not comparing notes or having it overly scripted. And then what I do on the day of the conference, no matter when I'm scheduled to present, I always like to come early and sort of just sit in the back and observe and absorb and sort of hear. And one of the things that I've found to be the most accurate indication to me of how good a fit a conference is, or the value in my own mind of a conference, is that I look at sort of the notes I've jotted down, and then I come and I listen to the early speakers, whether it's just a morning welcome or the invitation or the people before me. And I have found that the more that I am scribbling on my notes, saying, wow, I was going to say that too, or yeah, this is great, or I need to take this back and add it to my own, sort of the better experience that I have. So if there's any indication, just in the 15 minutes that I was here listening, you know, I've got all sorts of, you know, things that I am excited about hearing, that I said, yep, that's exactly what I would have conveyed or I wanted to convey. So you may find that, you know, you really don't need me here. I'll try to add what I can, but from the moment that I stepped in as a funder, and the thoughts and the perspectives and the conversations that happen inside the walls of the Hartford Foundation, that are our internal deliberations, have been very much validated by what Scott and Dr. Clark have said. And I will highlight a couple of those instances you know, over these next few minutes. But I can tell you that right away I knew this was a conference that is going to be of significant value, not only to you all as service providers, but it's going to be of significant value to us as a funder. Because when there are more effective and engaged and collaborative service providers who are actually in the trenches on the front lines doing the work, it makes for a more effective and impactful funder. It makes our job easier, knowing that your job is immensely more difficult than ours. As you talked about, you know, we are a funder that's eager to give away our money. And you know, some of my friends give me a hard time, oh yeah, Jay, your job must be really, really hard. I mean, you're like, you know, you're giving away money, and it's other people's money. I'm sure that stresses you out day in and day out. I acknowledge that, you know, the work that we do is a part of the cycle of ultimately addressing these issues, but it pales in comparison to what you all do day in and day out. So just let me give you a quick overview of the Hartford Foundation. It has been around, as we talked about institutions that have been around, you talked about 40 years or plus. We've been around for 94 years now. 94 years in existence in the greater Hartford community. Over those 94 years, we've given away almost $800 million. Just last year, we gave away 2,700 grants that totaled almost $39 million. We can't do this without people being generous. But I say all that to say, well, what does that mean? What is the value there? What is the impact? So over the course of 94 years, I'm sure that there's been, you know, impact we've had. There's great work that's been done, and I'm not devaluing or diminishing that at all. But let me tell you where we stand today. In our region, where we all live, work, and or play. Children from low-income white households move up the economic ladder at twice the rate of children from low-income black or Latino households. Here's where we stand today. 9% of the children born in the north end of Hartford, just minutes away from here, are incarcerated as adults, compared to less than 1% of their counterparts who grow up in a place like Simsbury. And that's not, you know, disparaging or saying anything, but those are just the facts. Only 36% of high school seniors from families who are eligible for free or reduced lunches. So for those families that are eligible for free or reduced lunches, only 36% of high school seniors persist to make it to their second year of college, compared to almost 60% of students whose families are not eligible for free or reduced lunches. So I quoted statistics that reflected issues with respect to the opportunity gap that's driven by race, place, or income. And it's not one is more sinister than the other, but depending on your race or your ethnicity, or depending on where you live geographically, or depending on your socioeconomic, the family status, it has a disproportionate effect on your quality of life. So that opportunity gap, while not new, continues to persist in our community, and in fact is even growing wider. Just last week, I was listening to NPR, and they were talking about a report that was recently issued by Georgetown University that, in a nutshell, says it is better in this country to be born rich than it is to be born smart. So, you know, if you think about it for a minute, it's like, you know, you're like, okay, that's not necessarily new, but think about what that says, that a highly regarded institution of higher learning, you know, has put it in that stark of a term, that in the United States of America, you're better off being born rich than smart. And they say that it's even more pronounced if you happen to be a young person of color. That the intellectual prowess that you may have, that the hard work that you put in is still important, but won't get you as far as your counterparts that are born to wealthier families. So again, not new. You know I wasn't born rich. I don't know about any of you. I've been blessed, but it has the potential to send a very chilling message to our young people who we say, work hard, be smart, hit the books, do all those things, and they are all important. But when the data says, yeah, I can do all that and still find myself struggling, not having the same opportunity, not to be, you know, we're not talking about people who just want to be, you know, more money than they know what to do with, or just, but people who just want to be comfortable, who want to provide for themselves and their families and contribute to their communities and be philanthropic. That we have reached a point in this country where, you know, there is potentially, depending on where the message is coming from, a disincentive for the intellectual pursuits that have so long been a part of the aspirations. So I say all that in the context of looking introspectively at the Hartford Foundation and a recognition that despite the fact that we've been around for 94 years, despite the fact that we've given over those 94 years almost $800 million, despite the fact that we are blessed to have an endowment today, depending on what, I haven't seen what the market is doing, but an endowment that is hovering around $1 billion. There is still more work to be done, that we can do better. When you talked about customers demanding more, whether the customers are your clients that you're serving, in your instance, or the customers being our donors, they're demanding more. It's no longer enough to say, well, we've been around. We're the largest community foundation in the state of Connecticut, one of the largest in the country, and we do all this good work. And you look around at our neighborhoods and our communities, and you look at this data that says, yeah, so what has been the effect? And again, that's not to say that the contributions and the grants that we've given haven't done good work. They absolutely have. But what it is to say is that we perhaps became complacent, perhaps became unintentional victims of sort of the ivory tower syndrome. Well, look, we're giving out all this money. We're doing all these things. And I arrived here at a time when our board of directors was clear that the great work and the history of the foundation that we're very proud of can't lull us into a sense of complacency and saying, well, we're just going to keep doing what we've been doing and somehow think that we're going to meet the challenges that the community faces today. So the board was clear that the foundation needed to build on its past to become more nimble, to become more proximate, to become a greater risk-taking organization, one that did not allow the perfect to be the enemy of the good, one that was going to be humble and understand that we make mistakes and that we're a learning organization, and to manifest that in our work in new and different ways, to ensure that we weren't becoming, and again, I don't think that there was an intentional hubris, but to ensure that as we go to work across the street at 10 Columbus Boulevard on the 8th floor in, very genteel and wonderful surroundings, that we don't lose sight of the fact that the real work happens here at the ground level, in the communities, with individuals such as yourselves and others who happen not to be in this room. So we took all that into account as we started thinking about our next strategic plan. One that is going to be informed by the disparities in the data that we just talked about. One that is going to be informed by our own experiences and our conversations with stakeholders and a recognition that we can't be all things to all people. I mean, $1 billion sounds like a lot of money, and it is. But it is limited even in the scope of the needs of this community. So the notion of trying to be all things to all people means you can, you look back and struggle to find where the impact of the work has been. So that being said, we went through a process of community engagement and stakeholder conversations and pulling all this together to really think about where we were going to move next. And that strategic plan that we are currently now operating under, and it's still in its early stages, is taking a more pronounced focus around 3 areas that aren't completely new, but build on the work that we've done in the past. We continue to believe that investing in education provides a significant return on investment. But now we're looking at education as a continuum, birth through career. And that career path might involve college, a 4-year or an advanced degree or a 2-year degree. But we use the term birth through career because education is a lifelong pursuit. And more, we also need to support and value paths of vocational skills and skills that don't require 2 or 4 or an advanced degree. So birth through career. Community safety has emerged as a priority because if you don't feel safe in your community, very little else matters. Understanding that the data demonstrates that there are segments of our community that are disproportionately impacted by violence more than others. And how can we focus our role and our resources, knowing that none of what we do alone. And again, we're not a direct service provider, but it's done through those partnerships. But how do we have more strategic partnerships that, again, begin to address some of these disparities? And the third area being community and economic development. And I'm particularly excited about that because my career over the past 15 or plus years has been centered on community and economic development, providing access to capital, helping to improve the community by working directly with those shoulder to shoulder who are living and investing and existing in those communities. So those three areas are still fairly broad, but what we're doing is focusing on the areas where the disparities are the greatest, where the disparities are the most pronounced. In doing that, we understand that we still have a role to play as a responsive grant maker. So the basic human needs, many of which are addressed in here, we continue to be, a supporter and a provider and a funder to the basic human needs. We believe that arts and culture have a role in increasing the quality of life, but arts and culture can also be used in each of those areas. When you talk about community safety, when you talk about the education continuum, and when you talk about community and economic development. We also are re-looking at how we utilize some of our other tools, our NSP, Nonprofit Support Program, that some of you are probably familiar with, which is about capacity building, which is part of what's going on here. How do we help nonprofits do what they do better? Whether it's through technology and the needs that they have, board development, fund development, whether it's through leadership, whatever the needs that the nonprofits have, how can we help build that capacity? But again, the focus now is those organizations that are working in those areas that I just highlighted, particularly around where those disparities exist. And the other tools that we have as a convener, as a public policy actor. We created a new subsidiary of the Hartford Foundation, HFPG Impact Greater Hartford, to do impact investing, to bring resources to community projects that don't require us to have a specific financial rate of return. In fact, we look at what is the community benefit as the rate of return, that being more important than whether we get a financial rate of return. And we're fortunate to be able to have the resources to do that the return and community benefit can weigh more heavily than what a typical capital provider would look like and what's the financial return they have, in addition to our ability to take more risk on behalf of the community. So this is where I want to point out a few areas that Scott and Dr. Clark talked about that are very much a part of the discussion. So this is where, I'm pulling back the curtain, if you will, behind some of the inner workings of the foundation, which, we are working to improve, which, like they say, isn't always pretty. Making of the sausage isn't always a process you want to see. I'm sometimes just bring it out to me after it's all dressed up and ready to go. I don't need to see sort of what's going on. So I'll give you a little bit of insight without scaring you away. When I talked about the notion that our customers are demanding more, and, our donors are demanding, hey, it's great, we appreciate what you guys do, but no longer is this just, hey, we want to donate to the Hartford Foundation and we're sure you do good things. It's demonstrate to us the impact. Show us, inspire us to continue to be a partner with the foundation in ways that are making a difference in the most pressing areas of the community. When Scott talked about bringing value to the table, advancing the mission, advancing the cause, I'm often, or most recently, been asked a question that I find a little bit off-putting. I don't think it's because the organizations are asking it are intentionally being off-putting, but it goes to the core of what you said, that I've been asked, as we've talked about our new strategic plan, how does my organization fit into your strategic plan? And after being asked that a few times, I try to say it's not about how your organization fits into our strategic plan. It's, first of all, let's look at the strategic plan. It identifies the most pressing areas in the community, not because we picked them arbitrarily, but because, the data, the experiences, the engagement. So when we put the strategic plan out, it wasn't about the Hartford Foundation. It was about here are the most pressing needs in the community, and here's the criteria that we looked at. So when someone says, how does my organization fit in your strategic plan? What I hear is, how do I keep getting the funding that I've been getting to do whatever it is, notwithstanding whether it aligns with the strategic plan or the needs of the community? And that's the question when you talked about bringing value to the table. When you talk about advancing the cause, what I want to hear, what we want to hear is, we've seen a strategic plan. This is the work that our organization is doing to advance that mission. Here's how we think we can be more impactful. Here's how we think we can be bring greater value. To me, that's exciting because I'm like, tell me more. Tell us more. Tell us how we can help you do that, as opposed to sort of like, hey, you got this new strategic plan, where do I fit? So just the notion of understanding that we don't do the work you do, but the work that you're doing, hopefully and ideally, is addressing the issues and the needs. And I know there is a myriad of needs. But when we put the strategic plan out, there is room enough for, a whole lot of organizations and the work that they are doing. So I just, the more I'm asked that question, and it sort of just, to me, sends the wrong signal that it's about my organization first and the money we need. And like it was said, it ain't about you. It's about the work. We need organization to do the work, but that should be the question. Dr. Clark talked about relationships that exist beyond the grant requirements and not engaging in a relationship just because the funders say that that's what you should do. And I will acknowledge we have probably been guilty of that. We have sent mixed signals that have organizations tying themselves into a pretzel. Oh, you want us to do this? Oh, yeah, we can do this, and we can do that, and we can do the other thing. And it's really in pursuit of resources, but really, again, not core to your true mission. Doing something because a funder says this is how we want you to do it. Again, not that there shouldn't be a conversation, but the relationships can't be about, like you said, you're dating that person simply because you're, we've all been, and sometimes it works out, a lot of times it doesn't. Maybe we're just better off as friends. So in that regard, we also are introspectively looking at all of our approaches and our policies and practices and the sometimes subtle messages that we send to nonprofit organizations that we don't want you to. We want to have a conversation about the work that is being done that doesn't have funders saying, well, it's the Hartford Foundation or recipients, so we have to sort of tie ourselves in this knot, and it really doesn't get to the core of our mission. He talked about relationships that are of shared purpose, shared intent, not to be confused with serving the same people, but those shared purpose, shared intent, that's what we want to hear about, are the ways that that collaboration can bring additional value. And you also talked about the fact that in certain instances, increased competition can bring better services. I know it can be a double-edged sword, but there is an opportunity through collaboration and through intentional partnerships to bring greater value and better services. And to a certain extent, some organizations, one of your ultimate goals or aspirations should be to put yourself out of business. If you're a provider of domestic violence counseling, I would hope that somewhere as you think about that, you would hope that maybe one day we won't be needed. That's an aspiration. Now, I don't know that we will get there in our lifetimes. We certainly would love to do that. But that should be the thing, not just to exist for the sake of existing. And in reality, domestic violence has been with us since humankind has existed. But we should always at least keep the fact that hopefully we can put ourselves out of business. Homelessness or, child abuse, all those things. As we work and aspire to there, if not putting ourselves out of business, let's at least have the notion that how can we provide the best services? And multiple organizations, you talked about this, are doing this. There are new nonprofits that open every day. Some people, and a good friend of mine from back in Ohio, was passionate about work and opened a nonprofit and started a nonprofit because people were saying, oh, you should do this. And if you establish a nonprofit, there'll be more resources available. And the minute she told me that, I just cringed. And I said, you can do this work without doing it under the umbrella of nonprofit. I said, or instead of starting a nonprofit, why don't you look around at nonprofits that already exist and bring your talent and bring your passion? Because yes, technically, an organization or a corporation, if you're not a nonprofit, it goes, oh, you're not a nonprofit, and you become a nonprofit. That doesn't mean you go back and say, oh, okay, well, how much do you need? It just, it's a general statement that as a nonprofit, you are eligible, for certain corporate funding or things like that. But by no means is it a guarantee. So after I talked, and she was talking about the frustrations with the board. Oh, I got these board members, and I said, well, how'd you pick your board members? Well, I know this person, and they were nice, and they have this. And I said to her, I said, being on a nonprofit board is virtually a full-time commitment if you do it right. And it's a full-time commitment that you don't get paid for. So you've got your career, you got your family, you got your other things, and then on top of this, you add. And she's like, oh, people aren't showing up to the meetings. And I said, because, again, they may be great people, may be intelligent and studious and have a passion, but understand that if they don't have a willingness to commit themselves to this, and not get paid and understand the fiduciary responsibility, you probably have the wrong people. So I say a lot to say that as we rethink about our approach, the strategic partnerships that we're talking about here are absolutely what we're thinking about. That we don't want nonprofits to be partnering up for the sake of partnering up to say, hey, look, Hartford Foundation, we've now partnered up, but that relationship really is only about the duration or the requirements of the grant. That it isn't intentional, that it isn't involving ongoing planning, that would exist even if we didn't provide the funding. That's the notion. A partnership that makes sense even if we won't provide funding, those are the partnerships that we really should be providing funding to. So, we're looking and knowing that sometimes our processes have been too inflexible, they've been too rigid, they have not been as welcoming. And I've told some of the staff, they looked at it as, well, we've got rigor, and if the nonprofit organizations, can't clear the initial evaluation, then we probably shouldn't be funding them. And what it, in effect is, it starts with, there's some of the staff that said, yeah, this should be the first thing. It's a brick wall. If somehow you can scale this brick wall and get inside, congratulations, now we can have a conversation. And I said, that's completely backwards. What we want to send the message is, the first thing we should be, I don't know if this is, so it's locked. So the first thing, that would have been really cool if it was open. I would have been like, yeah. You get my point, though. It shouldn't be a brick wall. Our front door should look like this. It should be open. Now, that doesn't mean we're going to fund everything. That doesn't mean that every idea we're going to be able to support. But people should walk away feeling that there was an open door, an ongoing open door for a conversation about what they're doing, what our role might be, even if they aren't funded. So there's some internal cultural change that is underway because people say, well, yeah, but, but if we do it the other way around, it keeps the quality here. And, I said, causing, but it sends the wrong message because, again, there are some organizations that would never even imagine having a conversation walking through our door. And that's a disservice to the community and a disservice to the work that they're doing and to the potential clients. So, whether it's literally coming through our door or having a phone call, that's the message we should be sending. And then where can we guide? And sometimes it's in one of our programs. Sometimes it's providing, advice or consultation. Sometimes it's directing them elsewhere. And it doesn't mean it's not a mutually exclusive idea that we can have rigor and still be very much open to the nonprofit community that is actually doing the work. So, I'll close, and if there's, certainly happy to answer, any questions or observations. That this work that we're doing is, we even decided that we weren't going to look at this work as a 3-year strategic plan, that this is going to be our work for the foreseeable future. The strategies may change, some of the approaches may change, but until we get a sense that children who are born in a particular geography in our community have a more increased or better chance to obtain quality education or gainful employment, and it is less driven. We're not going to solve racism. We're not going to solve classism. We're not going to solve these things. But until we feel that we have exerted every bit of resource, financial, intellectual, partnerships, to start making a measurable impact, this is going to be the work that we're engaged in. Or until a board says, nope, we're going to do something else, and And that's something else. If it's consistent with, if I have the opportunity to be leading the organization, it's consistent with the view and the vision on the ground, that's fine. And if a new board comes in and says, no, we're going to do something else, that's a decision that will be made at that point. But we took off sort of the arbitrary 3-year strategic plan and said, this is where we are. This is what the data says. This is what we're hearing from the community. So it's a work in progress. We can't do it without the partnerships, which are all of you and so many others. Bear with us as we go through this change. It, again, isn't always pretty inside. There's, some angst and discomfort with the fact that we're not changing as much as some people think, but some people just were comfortable with the status quo of how the foundation worked, both internally and externally. And those people are going to be discomforted because it's clear that maintaining that status quo was not going to allow us to be the valuable asset that we need and are obligated to be to this community. Our threat in the Hartford Foundation wasn't whether or not we were going to have, an endowment of $1 billion or so. That will be there in perpetuity. Our greatest threat was our relevance. Were we going to be impactful, or were we going to be seen as a dinosaur that says, yeah, the foundation's there, but they just don't connect themselves, and yes, they give grants, but it's not strategic and it's not impactful. So thank you all for the work that you're doing. Thank you for the invitation to come. Thank you for the notes that I am able to take back to the staff and continue to educate and evolve as an organization. Appreciate it.
So this is going to be your time to ask any questions of Jay. Let me just ask this opening question and give folks a chance to write down a question. Jay, you and I are new to the area. And, one of the things that is pretty clear is this fear of partnerships that exists within organizations. What have you learned? What have you seen? What can you recommend that the steps we take to overcome the fear of partnership so that it becomes intentional and meaningful?
I don't know that there's an easy answer. I can tell you that as a funder, we have to do a better job of making sure that we're not, again, sending a message of partnership for partnership's sake, that there is greater value and greater resources available for those intentional partnerships. I think being candid, we are often asked this question, and some of our board members, there's so many nonprofits out there. We need consolidation and fewer nonprofits, and Hartford Foundation should be, leading that charge. And I remind them, these organizations have boards of directors, they have executive directors, they have staff. It is not our place to, say there needs to be X number of nonprofits working in this particular area. What we can and should do is provide the right path and incentive, whether it's financially or through our capacity building or others. So, it really, I think, getting over it is some of the very candid, forthright statements that I've heard from both you and Scott, is educating and saying, if this can be done better by two organizations that collaborate, that one takes a slightly different role and not inferior to the other, but being willing to put the mission first and the existence of the organization second. I think the more we continue down that path, the more success we'll have. But it isn't easy because there's human nature of wanting to do good and share that.
Thank you for that. If you have a question, please raise your hand. Kiwan and or Tim will put a mic in your hand. Once you get the mic, please speak to the mic so we can hear you.
Hi, I'm Sandra Bradford Jennings with Community Partners in Action. We have a number of partnerships. Our focus is on program support, behavioral change for people who are involved in the criminal justice system. So we do a lot of reentry work, things like that. But we have a lot of partnerships, several partnerships with organizations around workforce development, preparation, and training. We have met with or submitted proposals to some other local foundations, and on more than one occasion, they told us, well, we already fund that partner. We're concerned about duplication of services, even though they do one part of it and we do the other part. So it kind of threw us. We weren't really even sure how to address it. We're like, well, do we go down to such and such and say, what are you doing with them? How come we don't have,
Right.
And so I don't know if you have any suggestions or recommendations or how to address situations like that.
I think, you pointed out is being willing to have a conversation with an organization that happens to be in that space. Some of them, and again, some of them may be more or less willing because they might perceive it as sort of a threat. But also, you know, not that you didn't do, but doing your homework with that potential funder and understanding if that's where that organization happens to be providing, you know, some services, but what you're providing, there is a distinction or a difference. To be able to communicate that to the funder and how the two aren't duplicative. If they are duplicative, some things are duplicative, but the volume and the need justifies a duplicative nature of it. It's like, okay, yeah, they're doing it, but what about all these folks who still need that? So being able to understand going in both and not just having duplicative be, that's kind of the easy way out. Got it, we're doing the same thing, but the need is so great. Yeah. Or it looks duplicative, but let me demonstrate why it isn't.
Right, right.
And again, some of those organizations may be open to partnerships.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you.
Great question, great answer. Raise your hand if you have a question.
Hi,
Hi.
how are you?
Good.
Lindsay Tango with Public Allies Connecticut, proud partner, many in the room, and the foundation. Great to hear from you. I was wondering if you could speak to, you talk about that like risk taking and really what sounds like changing the internal culture of the foundation. Like what's your vision? What's the result of that internal culture shift work that you're doing, like for the sector at large?
Right.
Maybe like what are some of the key differences of how we function together 10 years from now?
Right. Part of it, you know, it is an ongoing process, but what I did is I gathered, you know, 6 or 8, 9 months ago, my community investment officers who are really the folks who you all see and are working with on a day-to-day basis, and said to them, you know, I want you all to approach our grant making in ways that feel unencumbered. That if I said if I, and I ultimately did it, allocated each of our community investment officers X number of dollars. I said, with these resources, you don't have to abide by our internal process. You don't need to run this up the chain. I mean, the general parameters, you know, you got to do that. I can't be carted off to jail or things like that. But I said, with this pool of resources, I want you to think in a way that is unencumbered by, you know, oh, this policy, we got to do this, we got to do that, we got to do the other. And initially, there was like fear and hesitation, like, what? I'm like the boss, I'm the president, I'm allowed to say this. There was like, oh, we got to check with like our supervisor. I'm like, no, I'm your supervisor. You don't have to, that's the whole point. And that's why I had the conversation with the frontline staff. You know, before either I said, I'll talk to you. I said, I'll talk to the supervisor. But there was this notion like, I'm like, to me, that would be a dream to be a community investment officer and have the president say, hey, here's some resources, pretty much do what you want to do and come back and tell me how that works. And if it doesn't work, that's okay. What did we learn? So we're still kind of getting there. And I hope 10 years from now, I hope 5 years from now, 3 years, I hope 3 years from now, not even 10 years from now, you know, 2 or 3 years from now, that we've created a culture in the foundation that, yes, we have our policies and our parameters and our approaches, but there is such a innovative mindset. You know, you are nothing in Silicon Valley if you haven't had 3 failed startups. It's like, you know, unless you've had 3 failed startups, it's like, oh, you haven't. And here it's like, oh my gosh, a failure, that is. So to change that mindset that we're falling forward, that we're learning from it, that yes, we can still be a good steward. We're going to be a good steward of the resources that people give us, but we can be a good steward and still be smart risk takers. And the best individuals to take that risk, you know, I look at the big ideas and stuff, but I am inspired when I hear from our community investment officers and like, try this, try that, collaborate together, you know, challenge the organization internally about why so that's what I hope evolves. Sure.
If you have a question, please raise your hand. I see some hands back there. Jay, while we're getting the mic passed around, one of the cool things you did when you took the job was going to a listening tour. So do a quick comparison. What did you learn about partnerships when you went on your tour?
Right.
Visiting the different towns under your portfolio versus what did you learn about partnerships when you were in the White House? Right.
So yeah, the 29-town listening tour was one of the most gratifying personal and professional experiences. I was relatively new. You know, we went to each of the 29 towns, had a conversation on their turf, on their terms. We asked a couple of opening questions and said, how can we be more valuable? You know, we heard the good, bad, the ugly, and everything in between. And we needed to hear that. So, to me, that I saw and heard instances of real partnerships with characteristics as you described here, with intentionality, with planning, that existed beyond the grant term. Too often in Washington, D.C., we hear about public-private partnerships, and that's a term that's used, but it's difficult to find too many instances where it manifests itself successfully. And even partnerships between federal agencies. I mean, you probably would believe, but the turf and the competition that exists between federal agencies that are supposed to be, serving ultimately all serving the American people and serving, various segments of the communities. But it was hard to sometimes get, and I'll speak, I was at the assistant secretary level, the right people in a room because of the protocol, where you sat, and who you brought 3 staffers, I only brought 2. I mean, you had to get through all that to then actually get. By the time you got through all that, there was 18 minutes left to try to actually get to the issue at hand. So what we started to do somewhat successfully is I was at the Commerce Department, headed up the Economic Development Administration, Economic and Community Development. We started working more successfully with the U.S. EPA and USDA, United States Department of Agriculture, in their rural community economic. Long story short, we finally got to a point where we got 3 federal agencies to sort of accept, not quite a common application, but the requirements that we had at EDA, if a community engaged in, met those requirements, 2 of the other federal agencies would recognize that as the certification process for receiving their funds. So they didn't have to go to USDA Rural Development and EDA and EPA. So we said if one of the 3, we sort of sat in the middle, so we were able to capture the other 2, and the other 2 said if EDA certifies it, we'll accept that. So, that was like we like cured hunger or something at the federal level just to get to that point. Now, where it sits now, and we unfortunately happen to get that success toward the end of the administration, so who knows, where it exists now. But to me, that was, the term public-private partnership is used so often in D.C., but you see it really in the communities at this level, and you all are making it happen more so than, and not to, again, we need it. We hope to see it improve at that level, but it's a huge difference in the actuality of it.
Good morning.
Morning.
Thank you for your presentation. I'm Aisha Clark with Compass Youth Collaborative. So one of the questions I had was based on something you talked about putting partners together based on potentially their similarities. What do you do, or do you have any suggestions if that partnership might not be as intentional as Dr. Clark talked about? And maybe the idea or the intent is to work together and be collaborative, but if there's not that relationship there, it might not work, it's unintentional or sustainable after grant funding. So do you have any advice with that? Yeah,
so one, I would say, if I said it, then I misspoke. We're not about putting partnerships together. We are interested in those partnerships coming to us and sort of convincing and explaining to us why that partnership works. So if you find yourself as an organization, in that situation and you don't think that partnership is as intentional as it need be or doesn't look to lend itself to existing beyond that grant, that's not a partnership that would inspire a lot of excitement, to us. And what we would say in that conversation, if we were having a conversation with us and we're like, oh, this partnership, we like it or would be interesting, but you feel that isn't a partnership that really is sustaining beyond that, we want to hear that. Again, just because we sit with the, and I know you all know this, but there's a perception because we sit with a quote-unquote checkbook, what we say is gospel. No, it's not. And I've had to remind some of our folks inside that you've got an opinion, we've got an opinion, we've got some thoughts, we've got some, but, we don't get to dictate the terms or shouldn't be in a position of dictating the terms of partnerships or otherwise. Just because we happen to be on, this side of the financial transaction. So, we welcome, some of that pushback and that dialogue, and we don't want to, inadvertently facilitate or encourage a partnership that doesn't have intentionality, that you don't see as a good fit, and you've communicated to us why it isn't a good fit. Yeah, so I don't be afraid to have that conversation. Don't enter into one thinking it's going to impress the funder, and it really doesn't have those characteristics, and don't let the funder push or encourage you into one that doesn't have that same level of intentionality.
If you have a question, please raise your hand. This is the time to ask how the sausage is made. Yes.
Good morning. You had talked about getting the right people in the room, and I left Trinity College, this is before either of you were in the area, right before they started the learning corridor. And I have a similar vision for the North End. We've been a healthcare provider there for 45 years.
Who are you with? I'm sorry.
Intercommunity healthcare.
Got it. Okay.
So my vision for the North End, based on the issues that we see there, is creating a healthcare corridor and taking the Mount Sinai campus, which Trinity is interested in kind of tearing down, and all the abandoned buildings between the north of the adult center through the abandoned buildings that are there on the Coventry campus, and addressing the need of the health disparities, the reentry population, which is why we have a transitions plan, but also the employment and education issue, where we have folks who have opioid addictions, who have criminal records, and our kind of philosophy is we can teach them and partner with colleges and other areas to gain the skill sets. Maybe the record can be expunged, maybe they can get meaningful employment. And so this is the vision that we have. We've had some meetings with Trinity and some with the city of Hartford, but what advice do you have to try to get the right people in the room so we can take these ideas and take these needs and turn them into action?
Right. You know, we would love to be a part of those conversations. You know, sometimes we, you know, one of the assets or values that we bring as a convener is that people, you know, tend to want to convene or respond to convenings that we help to facilitate. So, you know, we converse with the city on a regular basis, have increased our engagement with Trinity. So you know, just maybe making us aware of it. We would love to be a part of those conversations. You know, the vision that you articulated is consistent. Again, so you did exactly what I hope would do more of, is you didn't say, how does, you know, my organization fit into the vision? You described something that I know we want to be a part of. So in that regard, you know, let's figure out where our role might be as a convener, as a potential funder, as a capacity builder. I don't know, but the same relationships or context, or the context of relationships that we have, you know, might bring an additional group of partners or voices to that table. Yeah, it's.
I appreciate that. If I can, I appreciate all of you if you have thoughts about joining that collaborative.
Sure.
Certainly. Before we have time for 2 more questions, I'm going to do a comment, and if you have a question, Kimon has a mic. Talk to us a little bit more about the necessity of our community, our businesses, to be more strategic before running up and asking for a check, because it tends to be a habit we have,
right,
and it's less of what the gentleman described in terms of a pre-designed program, pre-designed idea. Just talk to us more about what you're looking for.
You know, it takes patience and time, and it's hard. You know, the human nature of the anxiousness. There is that, as Dr. King talked about, that fierce urgency of now. We're in a society where there is instant access to information by way of technology, instant gratification. We've got to fix it right now, and it is caused sort of this frenzy that we're just running up and sort of, you know, we got to get the money. One of the things that I appreciate is, even from our funding cycle, people say, well, what's the application deadline? There isn't one. It is an ongoing process, which part of what we hope to do is we still get this notion that there's a flood of requests at the end of the year, which I understand human nature, like, oh, December, the money's going to run out and, you know, we're not going to be able to get funded in January. I'm like, yeah, no, it's the same. You know, we go through our budget process, but our budget process next year is going to look pretty much like it did last year. We're going to have resources available. So, you know, a thoughtful, deliberate discussion, you know, the best, I would argue that probably the best outcomes and grants tend to be those that came after a series of discussions with our community investment officer and tweak it a little bit more and then refine it and make it a little bit better and a little bit more thoughtful. Those aren't funded at any less of a rate than those that say, hey, I got it all together, I just need to get this thing done by next week. So, it's tough to resist that notion of the right now, but we're here. We've been here for 94 years. We'll be here for another 94, another 94 after that. The whole core of a community foundation with an endowment like ours is to exist in perpetuity. So, a more thoughtful, deliberate process is welcoming to us. And that doesn't, and that, again, doesn't mean, and we also recognize, as said to the staff, we can't have a, 120-day or 90-day decision. I mean, some of these things, if it's well thought out, let's pull the trigger and get it done. We don't need to debate and deliberate, internally for 6 weeks on some of these things.
Makes sense. My question is, what would be your thought process to get some of the agencies and nonprofits together to more effectively work with the youth and the families with a two-gen approach? I'm Stephon Palmer from Youth on Fire. We work with youth ages 9 to 18 in the North End. And a lot of the youth say there's programs, but it's not programs they want.
Right.
So how would you go about getting people in the room that have gotten grant money or want to work with the youth to the table to listen, to say, okay, you know what you did was great, but it didn't bring in results. It got them in the seat and they left.
Yeah, we are increasingly more about, not just activities, but impact and outcomes. I can only say that, our community investment officers are more engaged with our growing research and evaluation team. So in instances like that, like 5 years ago, that conversation, if it involved us, might just have one of our community investment officers. Now it's going to have our community investment officer and someone from our research and evaluation team that really is thinking about outcomes and impacts. To your point, oh, that's great, you got them in the seat, but at the end of the day, where was the measurable difference? So, we were late to the game, and again, that was a struggle even internally of getting the organization and some of the siloed departments in the foundation. Well, we're doing this. Well, what do you mean? They felt someone's going to be looking over their shoulder. It's like, no, this is not your work. It's our work. And yes, it's not looking over your shoulder, but we need to be able to demonstrate. So we're changing internally. So those conversations for us, how we're doing it is bringing other team members to those conversations and having those conversations with all of the potential grantees that we're talking about, really focusing on outcomes and building that into focusing on it, and also knowing that sometimes we have to add additional resources to the grant for that. So we're not just saying, hey, it's an outcome. We're like, oh, we know there's some additional resources needed, so we're willing to put that on the table too.
One more question before Jay leaves us today.
Being in a position where you have all these nonprofits coming and approaching you, pitching to you, do you have any plans in the future to kind of utilize the successes that you've seen, progress that they've made to kind of influence and assist the nonprofit community as a whole?
If not necessarily influence and assist, but I think it's important that we elevate and communicate those successes. And again, I want to be careful that there are areas that we can and do and should have influence, and there are other areas where, we are sort of a neutral, agnostic, player. So, but yes, I do think we do collectively need to do more about highlighting and celebrating those successful approaches, demonstrating, this is, particularly when they involve strategic partnerships and innovative new ways. Sometimes this, came here in the land of steady habits, as has been called. There is this notion of we've done ourselves a disservice even as a foundation of being sometimes too low-key and behind the scenes. And, we need to very much, I think, and to your point, be more visible and communicative about things like that. Yeah.
Before I let you go, what's been your favorite thing about Connecticut since moving here?
Oh man, my favorite thing about Connecticut since moving here. I don't know. This is a lot like home. So I enjoy DC. But I'm from Youngstown, as you said, and Youngstown and Hartford have a lot in common. Not only Youngstown and Hartford, but the Connecticut Western Reserve extended to parts of Northeast Ohio centuries ago. So I think really just the experience of getting to see and meet people in a relatively small community who are giving of themselves. You see them in one instance they've got this hat on or they're not capacity, and like the next week I'll see them at something else and they'll be doing something completely different but equally as passionate. That's been interesting. So I don't know. I just enjoying being. I really enjoy DC, but I enjoy now being able to be back on the ground in a position to, I think, help facilitate and see impactful change in the community where I live. And that just wasn't in DC. What was great, I was flying around the country and you sort of come in and you leave. You come in, you leave. And that's different than being here, living here, and being able to partner. So in that regard, and it's only been 2 years, so we're still learning my way around and finding the culinary delights. So it's all, yeah. So,
Jay, thank you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Thank you all.
We'll take a few minutes break and we'll be back together at 10:45.
You want me to turn this off? No.